just looking at the side of the pipe cores alone. Excuse me. I don't necessarily think it would be a good idea to put a cap on pipe cores or bands in general. And there's a few reasons behind that really. One of them I think is, in a way, it kind of, I suppose, kind of limits people's progression. I mean, if you just look at human nature, is to always to try to work towards being the best that you can be, I suppose, you know. And if you're saying to people, okay, you can't join a certain band because they've got full roster and you've got no space for them, and in essence, I suppose what you're saying is that you can't join that band, so therefore you've reached the ceiling. You know, now, okay, there perhaps other bands, but if all the bands, you know, it's all bands, the grade 1 bands that have a full roster, then what happens? You know, where do you go? You want to progress, you want to work towards being the best you can be, and you're being told you can't. In essence, I suppose. So that's one of the main reasons why I don't really think it would be a good idea to cap the bands. I mean, talking, I suppose, from personal experience, I sort of come up through the grades, and I didn't end up playing with a grade 1 band for any length of time until I was about 24, I think. So I've been playing for a good number of years before I actually made the jump into grade 1. I was quite happy playing in grade 2 and all the rest of it because I was doing my solo thing and all that. But there are people out there who don't do solo things. You know, they aspire to play with the band and try to join the best band. So from that point of view, you know, I suppose if you look at that, I had a sideline, if you like, and I was able to progress my piping through my solos. I don't necessarily follow the line of argument that people would, you know, if you look at, I can only sort of speak for my own band, and, you know, looking at the argument that people would necessarily go and join other bands. Looking around my pipe core, obviously I've had good cause to have a look around the pipe core and speak to the guys quite openly about this whole debate. Not today, but in general. And you know, of the roster of 32 that I have, there's perhaps at least 8 of these guys that if I was forced to turn around and say to them, you know, well, you've no longer got a spot because I can't have you in the band. The roster's set, or the cap's been set at whatever the number is, then these guys wouldn't go and join another band. They would stop. They would drop piping altogether. And to me, that is not really a good thing for the art, for the whole movement, because what you're talking about there is people or guys who are very good players and more than capable of playing at the top level, no longer than playing. And these are not old guys, you know. A lot of the guys in the band are very sort of young or sort of mid-20s and what have you. So, to me, that's a very negative thing as far as the whole pipe band movement's concerned, because you end up losing good players because, you know, they can't or they don't want to go and join another band. And I suppose in a way that leads me on to, you know, why do guys come and ask to join the band or any band for that matter. And I suppose what that comes down to is people are inspired and excited by what the band does, the musical direction that the band's taken. And again, I'm not talking about just ScottishPower here, I'm talking about every band. There's a reason that a person will want to play with a band, and that's, I think, down to the leadership of the band and the direction. And the direction that the band's taken. So if you're, again, it comes down to this whole thing whereby you're just telling people that they can't do what they want to do, really. And I don't really subscribe to that. One of the other benefits of having a large pipe core is the ability to be able to, for example, last night, the concert that we did and the energy concert that we did a few years ago one of the big benefits of having the numbers there was that what I was able to do was rotate the people on stage, and so therefore share the workload of the concert over the membership of the Pipe Corps, rather than have everybody learn all the stuff. And perhaps that isn't the best thing to do, but it certainly worked well for us. So I found that helped the whole sort of logistics of doing a concert, and because the workload, as we all know, in one of these things can be pretty hard going, especially when people have full-time jobs and things like that as well.
Okay, so thanks very much, Chris. I think Chris has stated his position in his first 5 minutes opening argument. So Chris, turn it over to you to respond directly to some of the things that Bill raised, perhaps. Give you another 5 minutes here.
This is where I should have took some notes. So I think maybe some of the things that I've mentioned here kind of sort of is challenging some of the things that you said there, Bill. The whole cap thing, I think perhaps the larger numbers allows us, and I know there are people out there that sort of disagree with this, but it allows us to orchestrate more what we do with the Pipe Corps in terms of with it being not a dynamic instrument, having the ability to have more harmony lines and what have you, to create the illusion, I suppose, of dynamics. To me, seems to be the way to go. I think that some of the things that we're doing nowadays are certainly a lot more progressive than what they would have been in the past, and I suppose if you look at one of the things that I sort of had to think about was, if you look at the likes of orchestras and things like that, a lot of the times, the orchestras are not perhaps capped at a certain number of players in certain sections. The piece that they play determines the amount of players that they would have on stage, so it's down to the composer of the piece in the first place. And I suppose in a way what we're doing nowadays is, with a lot of compositions that are being produced nowadays, the harmony lines and what have you are taken into account by the composer or the arranger, and certainly I think about that kind of thing when I'm constructing a medley. It's one of the things that we're doing this year in the last tune is a thing actually that Shotts had done a few years ago when Robert was the pipe major, was to try to create a sort of dynamic effect where the melody line comes from a single note and comes back in again. And I think if we had less numbers, then the effect of that perhaps wouldn't be as noticeable. And the other thing as well, I sort of think about, I'm very fortunate in being based in Glasgow that geographically there's sort of good transport links, and it's reasonably sort of, I'm not going to say easy, but it's kind of more convenient for people to travel and not to have to travel too far to be a member of the band. The geographical thing is, I suppose in a way, if I think back to when I first joined the band, I started with something like 16 players. And I had flying players, and I had guys coming up from down south, London and places like that. And it's difficult to manage that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, if your band is in a certain geographical location, that's part of the challenge. In my book, is to try to make it work. Just to reiterate what I said, though, obviously I'm quite lucky being based here in Glasgow that there's access to lots of good players. But I think you've got to, if one of your challenges is to try to find membership, given a geographical location, that's part of your pipe major's role, is to overcome these challenges. it's not necessarily to say, right, okay, well, all the other bands are taking all the players.
No.
Dealing with geography, it really is a significant problem for pipe bands in Canada. Throughout the time that I had the Frasers, we were having people travel untold distances that the average Scottish pipe band member would never entertain. I mean, I'm talking about people traveling 4 hours one way and even more to get back and forth to practice. So it's a real significant problem, and it's one of the things that militates against us having access to a large pool to make the numbers possible. I'm not sure, Chris, I buy the argument that your 8 guys who you would have to tell would go somewhere else wouldn't go anywhere else. They would just quit. I'm not sure I buy that, because anybody who's in this room is so insanely, passionately in love with piping that, I mean, we all find a way to do it and to keep on doing it. I mean, I can't imagine not playing bagpipes as long as I can do that. And I think that's what all of us sort of feel in our hearts, that I mean, this is really like, it defines you and it's part of your life. And I don't think you walk away from it all that easily. Let me, Chris is talking about orchestrations and stuff, and that's true. I agree with him that the modern pipe band does orchestrate a little more inventively than at any time in the past. But again, we have to remember our limitations are very, very strict and severe. We don't have access to other voices, so that takes us completely out of the sphere of comparing us to any other kind of band or orchestra. We got one voice, and it's loud and it's in your face and it never stops. So it really limits things. The second thing is that there are distinct limitations on how you can create harmonies and counter melodies. I can't think of more than 1 or 2, or perhaps a few, maybe somebody's got a brighter idea here, tunes where you can actually create more than 2 lines of harmony, 3 at a max, and then only in certain portions because of the limitations of our scale and the intervals and all of that. And you certainly have trouble combining both harmony lines and counter melodies because it just gets so cluttered in the performance of the piece. One thing that concerns me is that we bother to define minimum numbers, and they're preposterous. I mean, 8 pipers for a grade 1 band, it's, I mean, by definition, it ain't going to go. But if we define minimums, why can we not define maximums? So I had a look at some of the other musical organizations and how they deal with the issue of numbers, and I couldn't possibly cover everything. But the Common Gaelic Society in Ottawa, the Gaelic Folk Group Contest, groups of 3 to 6. Certiman Choral, I don't even know what that is. I think it's European. The Mixed Voice Contest, choirs of a minimum of 20 and a maximum of 40. DCI, Drum Corps International, in their world-class category, which is the very highest category, they have a maximum of 150, which includes all musicians, the color guard, the national color squad, the sergeants, the majors, all of that kind of thing. Well defined, you can't go beyond 150. The English Brass Band Championships, a maximum of 25 brass players and 1 percussionist. I know a lot of you out there would be saying, oh God, wouldn't that were pipe bands? But I'll leave that to others to be snotty about. Anyway.